Welcome, explorer, to the final chapter of our journey through the world of ancient Sumer. Today, we stand at the threshold of Twilight, the end of the first great civilization and the dawn of new empires. In this episode, we will witness the fall of the Sumerian city-states, the fading of the Anunnaki, and the echoes of their myths and achievements across the ages. We will also explore the mysteries that still linger beneath the sands and in the stories passed down through generations. As centuries passed, the once thriving cities of Sumer began to face mounting challenges. The mighty rivers that brought life to the land also brought destruction. Repeated floods, shifting river courses, and periods of drought strained agriculture and threatened food supplies. The careful balance between nature and humanity, so central to Sumerian belief, grew harder to maintain. Meanwhile, new peoples arrived from the surrounding regions. The Akkadians, led by the legendary Sargon, rose to power in the north. They spoke a different language, but admired the culture and wisdom of the Sumerians. Rather than erase the past, the Akkadians adopted and adapted Sumerian myths, gods, and cuneiform writing, blending traditions into what would become the foundations of the next great Mesopotamian empires. But for the Sumerian city-states, unity was always a challenge. Rivalries over water, land, and power were constant. Cities such as Ur, Lagash, and Umma often found themselves at war, draining resources and weakening defenses. As internal strife grew, the ability to respond to external threats diminished. Invasions by the Gudians, a mysterious people from the Zagros Mountains, brought chaos and destruction. The great temples were looted, fields left untended, and ziggurats fell silent. Yet, the spirit of Sumer endured. Local rulers, like Ur-Nammu of Ur, managed to restore order for a time, ushering in a final golden age known as the Third Dynasty of Ur. Under Ur-Nammu and his successors, law codes were written, ziggurats rebuilt, and art and scholarship flourished once more. But even this renaissance could not last forever. Climate change, salinization of farmland, and renewed invasions took their toll. By around 2000 BCE, the last Sumerian kings fell, and the old cities faded into memory. The land passed to new powers, Babylonians, Assyrians, and others, who carried the torch of civilization forward. The myths of the Anunnaki also changed. Once the divine council at the heart of Sumerian religion, they became distant, their roles absorbed or reimagined by new gods and new stories. The flood myths, the epic journeys, the cosmic struggles, these tales lived on, retold in Akkadian, Babylonian, and later even biblical traditions. The Anunnaki themselves became figures of legend, their names whispered as ancient memories. Yet, the legacy of Sumer did not vanish. The cuneiform tablets buried in the ruins preserve the voices of scribes, kings, and priests. Their writings influenced Hammurabi's laws, Babylonian astronomy, and Assyrian statecraft. The very concept of the city, the temple, and the written word. All these are gifts from Sumer to the world. Modern archaeology has uncovered wonders that seemed lost to time. The royal tombs of Ur, filled with gold, music instruments, and mysterious artifacts, still spark questions about the rituals and beliefs of the ancient Sumerians. Each new discovery, a tablet, a statue, a buried ziggurat, brings us closer to the people who built the first cities, worshipped the Anunnaki, and dreamed the world into being. But mysteries remain. Why did the Sumerians disappear so completely? What exactly caused the collapse? War, famine, environment, or perhaps a combination of all? And what truths are hidden in the stories of gods descending from the heavens, teaching humanity, and then departing as the old world faded away? Some believe the Anunnaki were more than just myths, pointing to the advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and architecture found in Sumerian records. Others see the gods as symbols, reflections of humanity's hopes, fears, and awe before the mysteries of nature and the cosmos. Whatever the truth, the fascination endures. As we look closer at the decline of Sumer, it becomes clear that no single event or enemy brought down this remarkable civilization. Instead, it was a long, complex process, a gradual unraveling shaped by both human choices and forces beyond anyone's control. For centuries, the Sumerian city-states were locked in competition. Each city, Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, Eridu, sought to expand its influence, secure its borders, and claim the favor of the gods. Rivalries over fertile land and vital water supplies often erupted into open conflict. Armies marched, city walls were besieged, and rulers boasted of their victories in inscriptions that survive to this day. Yet, every victory came at a cost. The land was scarred, resources drained, and the people exhausted. Meanwhile, the rivers, which had always been both the lifeblood and the greatest threat to Sumer, began to change. Centuries of irrigation, while allowing agriculture to thrive, gradually increased the salt content in the soil. Fields that once yielded abundant harvests became barren and white with salt. Crops failed, famine spread, and the city populations became more vulnerable to disease and unrest. In the face of these hardships, the Sumerians turned to their gods and the ancient rituals that had, for so long, brought prosperity and order. Priests led elaborate ceremonies to appease the Anunnaki, offering sacrifices and prayers for rain, fertility, and peace. Yet, as the crises deepened, many began to feel that the gods had turned away. The ancient hymns and lamentations from this period speak of temples abandoned, statues left unwashed, and the terrifying silence of the ziggurats once believed to be the bridges between earth and heaven. The myth of divine abandonment took root. It was said that the Anunnaki, angered by the failings of humankind, had withdrawn their protection. In the famous Lament for Uar, a poem etched on clay tablets, the people described the city's destruction as the will of the gods. Its people, not potsherds, filled its streets. Its people, in fear and famine, filled its broad places. The Anunnaki, the great gods, have decided its fate. This sense of cosmic disfavor, of a broken pact between gods and people, became a recurring theme in the final centuries of Sumer. These beliefs were not just religious. They were also a way to make sense of a changing world. As the Sumerians faced repeated invasions, crop failures, and political chaos, the idea that the gods themselves had left was both a source of despair and a powerful explanation for suffering. It also reflected a deeper truth, that the world the Sumerians had known was ending, and that new powers were rising to take their place. Among those new powers were the Akkadians and, later, the Amorites and Babylonians. The Akkadian Empire, under Sargon and his descendants, absorbed much of Sumerian culture, including the myths of the Anunnaki. But the gods were reinterpreted, sometimes merged with Akkadian deities, sometimes given new roles in the cosmic order. For the Babylonians, the Anunnaki became judges of the underworld rather than active creators and protectors. Their presence faded from the center of daily life and ritual, taking on a more distant, mysterious quality. Despite this, the stories and wisdom of the Sumerians endured. The cuneiform script they invented was used for centuries after their cities fell. Their legal codes, astronomical observations, and epic poetry became the foundation for later civilizations. The Anunnaki, though no longer worshipped as living gods, survived in legend and literature, sometimes as rulers of the dead, sometimes as ancient teachers, and sometimes as enigmatic beings whose true nature remains a mystery to this day. The archaeological record reveals both the trauma of the end and the resilience of Sumerian culture. Excavations in Uar, Nippur, and Lagash have uncovered layers of destruction, burned buildings, toppled statues, hastily abandoned homes. Yet, above these layers, later generations rebuilt. The ziggurats were restored, temples reopened, and new kings claimed descent from Sumer's legendary rulers. In many ways, the spirit of Sumer lived on, woven into the fabric of the entire region. The fall of Sumer also sparked new stories. tales of lost knowledge, vanished cities, and gods who might one day return. Some ancient texts hint at the idea that the Anunnaki were not gone, but merely waiting, hidden beyond the horizon or among the stars. These stories would inspire generations of storytellers, philosophers, and even modern seekers of ancient mysteries. In popular imagination today, the Anunnaki are often linked to theories about ancient visitors, lost civilizations, or forgotten wisdom. While scholars emphasize the cultural and symbolic significance of these myths, it is undeniable that the aura of mystery and power surrounding the Anunnaki continues to captivate. They have become a bridge between the ancient world and our own curiosity about the unknown. But perhaps the greatest legacy of Sumer is not just in its myths or monuments, but in its example of human creativity and perseverance. In a harsh and unpredictable land, the Sumerians built cities, invented writing, developed science, and asked profound questions about the universe and humanity's place within it. They looked to the heavens, saw patterns and stories, and imagined a cosmos alive with meaning. As the final centuries of Sumer unfolded, a sense of uncertainty and impending change permeated every aspect of life. The people of Uruk, Lagash, and Eridu could feel the shifting winds of fate. The rivers that once brought prosperity now sometimes brought disaster. The walls of the great cities, once symbols of strength, now cast long shadows over streets that echoed with worry, not triumph. The records left behind show a people struggling with adversity, but also determined to endure. Clay tablets from this period are filled with prayers for mercy, lamentations for lost cities, and pleas for the return of divine favor. In the famous lament for Sumer and Uar, the writers mourn not only the destruction of temples and palaces, but the loss of the gods themselves. Where once the Anunnaki feasted, the wind now howls. The shrines are empty, the altars cold, and the people wander, searching for hope. Archaeologists, digging through the layers of mud and brick, have uncovered dramatic evidence of this tumultuous time. They find burned layers in the ruins, signs of sudden destruction, perhaps by invading Gudians or Amorites. In some places, hurried burials and toppled statues suggest panic and chaos. Yet, above these layers, later generations rebuilt, sometimes atop the ruins of the old. This cycle of collapse and renewal is a powerful reminder of human resilience. Among the most fascinating discoveries are the cuneiform tablets that record not just the events of the time, but the beliefs and feelings of the people who lived through them. These texts reveal a profound sense of loss, but also a hope that the old order might return. The Anunnaki, once central to every ritual and decision, became more distant in these stories, sometimes blamed for the suffering, sometimes invoked as the only hope for salvation. As the Sumerian world faded, new rulers sought legitimacy by claiming descent from Sumer's legendary kings, or by restoring temples to the ancient gods. The third dynasty of Uar, led by kings like Uar-Nammu and Shulgi, tried to recapture the greatness of the past. They rebuilt ziggurats, composed new hymns, and wrote law codes that echoed the wisdom of earlier days. For a while, it seemed as if Sumer might rise again, but the pressures of drought, salinization, and constant threats from neighboring peoples proved too great. With the final fall of the Sumerian city-states, the perception of the Anunnaki also evolved. In Babylonian and Assyrian times, these gods were transformed into judges of the underworld or became distant elder gods, revered but no longer directly involved in human affairs. The stories of creation, the flood, and the descent to the underworld were rewritten and adapted, blending Sumerian traditions with new myths and new deities. Yet even as their temples crumbled, the Sumerians' legacy endured. The cuneiform tablets survived, buried for millennia, waiting to be rediscovered. When archaeologists first uncovered these tablets in the 19th and 20th centuries, the world was stunned by the sophistication of Sumerian astronomy, mathematics, law, and literature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, was revealed to be the world's earliest great epic, telling a story of friendship, loss, and the search for meaning, a story as relevant today as it was 5,000 years ago. Modern scholars debate the reasons for Sumer's fall. Some point to environmental collapse, the steady salinization of the soil, changing river courses, and a series of devastating droughts. Others emphasize the relentless warfare between city-states, which left them vulnerable to outside invaders. Still others look to the changing trade routes and the rise of new powers in the region. Perhaps it was all these factors together, woven into a single tapestry of decline. Amid these academic debates, the myths themselves have taken on a life of their own in popular culture. The image of the Anunnaki has inspired countless theories, from ancient aliens who visited Earth and taught humanity, to secret guardians of lost wisdom. Books, documentaries, and films have reimagined the Anunnaki as everything from benevolent teachers to mysterious overlords, blending archaeology, science fiction, and fantasy. Why do these stories continue to captivate us? Perhaps because they speak to something fundamental. The human desire to find meaning in loss, to believe that knowledge and greatness are never truly gone, just waiting to be rediscovered. The ruins of Sumer invite us to imagine what once was and what could be again. The Anunnaki, in these modern retellings, are sometimes seen as symbols of hidden potential or as reminders that the achievements of the past were not the work of isolated geniuses, but of cultures open to the unknown, curious about the cosmos, and willing to dream big. Whether as gods, legends, or metaphors, the Anunnaki connect us to the enduring questions of origin, destiny, and the power of story. Even today, the spirit of Sumer resonates. Astronomers map the stars, scientists seek the origins of life, writers craft epics about heroes and gods. Cities rise and fall, but the drive to build, to understand, and to reach for the unknown is as strong now as it was beneath the shadow of the ziggurats. As we conclude our series, let us remember the Sumerians as more than the first city builders or inventors of writing. They were explorers of the mind and spirit, seekers after truth in a vast and mysterious world. Their journey from creation to collapse, from myth to memory, reminds us that every civilization leaves traces, not just in stone and clay, but in the hearts and dreams of those who come after. Thank you for walking these ancient streets with us, for listening to the voices of the past, and for keeping alive the questions that make us human. May the mysteries of Sumer and the stories of the Anunnaki continue to inspire wonder, curiosity, and the search for meaning in every age.